Okay, I would like to do lesson Reish Ayin Vav 276 tonight. Okay, this lesson is about Shabbos and the food that we eat on Shabbos. Da, says Rebbe Nachman, you should know, Ki achila Shabbos eina b'shvil svia klal. The eating that is done on Shabbos is not for satiation at all. Rak begin di'isbochen kula shita yomim. But rather it's that all 6 days of the week should be blessed. Kemuva b'zohar, like it says in the Zohar, and this is in Parshas Yisro, page 88, that the eating done on Shabbos is not to satiate oneself, but rather to bring down blessing to the 6 days of the week. Ki ma'achile Shabbos nishpoyam v'nisbarchen kol sheshes hayomim. For from the eating, the food that we eat on Shabbos, there comes down bounty and blessing for all 6 days of the week. Ki ika hasviya b'Shabbos, because satiation is from Shabbos itself. Ki suma ein lo soveya, because the Gemara says that a blind man can never know satiation. Shalom the Rebbe Zechronim Levrocha, and it says that in the Gemara of Yoma, page 74, side B. There the rabbis of blessed memory, they teach this, Mepasek hamachilcha min hamon bamidba lemana noscha, that I fed you manna in the desert in order to afflict you. And this verse is a verse in Devarim, in Deuteronomy 8:16, where Moses is reviewing the history of the Jewish people, and he's talking about the manna that they ate in the desert, and there it says, "Hamachilcha mon b'midbar lemana noscha," that who fed you the manna in the desert in order to afflict you. Now, even before we go further, let me just explain it so far. What the Gemara says there is that that there's this verse, I fed you who fed you manna in the desert in order to afflict you. What was the affliction? Well, the manna actually looked like coriander seeds, and it was covered with dew, and it didn't have it tasted really like honey, all right, like sort of like a honey cracker of sorts. That was how it tasted, and the problem was that that's how it tasted, and people got tired of it. So magically or miraculously, anything you wanted it to taste like, it tasted like. So you could have tofu, you could have frankfurters and sauerkraut, you could have anything you want, right? But there's still a great problem with that. What's the problem? If it tastes like something, but what you're looking at is the manna, and there's no food that looks like that in the whole world. It's very peculiar looking. And so could you imagine if you ate green hot dogs, right? I mean, and everything you ate was green. So there's a certain inner satisfaction that comes from seeing what you're eating. So you can feel fulfilled. You can feel like you've eaten something, your stomach is no longer hungry, but you can't know real satiation if you don't see what you're eating. Therefore, the Gemara says, Suma, a person who is blind, ein lo seveya, doesn't know satisfaction. Okay? And Therefore, the Gemara says there's a verse, Tov Mara Einayim Mecholach Nofesh, that better what a person sees with their eyes than the fantasies of the soul. In other words, you can imagine something, but if you see it, it's much more satisfying. And from here we learn that you can't compare Ein Doma Mi Sheroa V'Ochel, somebody you can't compare somebody who sees and eats, the Mi She'eino Roa V'Ochel, to someone who eats but doesn't see what the food looks like. So what do we get from all of that? We find out, according to Rebbe Nachman, one of the things we learn is that, food, when you see it and eat it and enjoy it, you get satisfaction, okay? And we learn this from the fact that the verse tells us that I who gave you manna in the desert in order to afflict you. We also know that there is a passage in the Gemara. The Gemara is in Brachot, okay, page 43, side B, and there it says that when a person takes big steps during the week, then this takes away 1/500th of his eyesight. It doesn't mean literally his eyesight, it means his ability to have information that's insightful. He can't think as well. And this is returned to him during the Kiddush that's said on Friday night. Nimsa, so it comes out, She'ika Shleimus Mor Einayim Hu B'Shabbos, that the perfection of one's eyes happens on Shabbos. V'al kein oz hasvia, and therefore on Shabbos, since one has all of his eyesight, he can see clearly, and the fact that the people in the desert were afflicted by the manna because they couldn't see it clearly, therefore we see that Shabbos heals the eyes, and when the eyes are healed, one can know satisfaction. Ki hasvia al yedei riyas einayim, because satisfaction comes about as a result of what the eye is able to see. V'zeh, and this is what we say in the Zmirot, the songs that we sing at the table on Friday night. Then one of the things we sing there is about Posem bo Pesiya Ketana, Soadim bo levarach shalosh piyamim, that on this day we take small steps, right? And on it have a su'uda, we have a meal to bless 3 times. And then we have a blessed meal 3 times. In Shabbos we're supposed to have 3 meals, one on Friday night, one on Shabbos morning, Saturday morning, and one Shabbos afternoon. Hainu sheb'Shabbos posem psiya ketana. In other words, on Shabbos we take small steps. Sha'al yedei zeh hamor einayim b'shleimus. And as a result of taking small steps on Shabbos, then one's eyesight is perfected. Sha'al yedei zeh hasvia, that as a result of this, there's a satiation. V'al kein ma shesoadim bo sholosh po'amim u'rak levarach. Therefore, the fact that we have 3 meals on Shabbos, right, is only for blessing. Taina begin the isborchen kol shita yomim. In other words, as the Zohar that we mentioned before says, we eat in order that all 6 days of the week be blessed. Avol b'shvil Shabbos atzmo, but because of the fact that it's Shabbos itself, lo hoyetzarech le'achal kol kach sholosh pa'amim, then we wouldn't need to eat so much, like 3 meals. Ki b'Shabbos hasvia, because Shabbos is in itself satiation. Raku levarech. But the satiation, that's Shabbos, and the fact that we eat on Shabbos is to bring down the blessing from Shabbos into the 6 days of the week. So the pasuk, the verse says in Genesis 1:31, "V'yavarech Elokim es yom hashvi'i v'yikadosh oso," that God blessed the seventh day, that's the Shabbos, and He sanctified it. Thus, Shabbos brings special blessing. Okay? Now, if you're familiar a little bit with the Kabbalah, the Shabbos corresponds to the sphere of Malchut, which is the last of the Sfirot. And Malchut is the feminine counterpart to what's called Zeir Anpim, small face, and that means the emotional realm, the spheres of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. There are 6 spheres there that correspond to the 6 days of creation, and the light of the 6 days of creation in all of its glory shines in and is made manifest in the Malchus, or on the Shabbos. And Malchus is like a mirror. It doesn't have any of its own light. It simply makes manifest the goings-on in the Sfirot above itself. Okay? On the other hand, the spheres of the emotional realm called Zeir Anpim, small face, they receive their light from Bina. And Bina means understanding, but actually it means like it's a concept. So there's Chochmah is the idea, and Bina is its conceptualization. And Chochmah and Bina are considered Abba v'Ema, their father and mother, and you can't separate them. So Chochmah and Bina are considered like Trei Rei and the Lois Pashran. They're 2 friends that never separate. Wherever you have an idea, then you have a little bit conceptualization. If I tell you, hey, I had an idea, you say, what was it about? I have to be able to say something about it. Otherwise, for all intent and purpose, I didn't have an idea. So you see that in order to have the idea, it comes with a little bit conceptualization right at the beginning. On the other hand, if I'm going to conceptualize the idea, then where did you get that idea from? Well, I got it. Where did you get that? Why the idea is what I'm utilizing in order to make manifest in a conceptualized form. So in order to conceptualize an idea, I have to first have the idea. So Chochmah and Bina are Trei Rei and Delois Pashrat. They're 2 friends that don't separate. And so what really happens is that the Shabbos, which is Malchut, draws energy, revitalization from Chochmah and Bina, mostly through Bina, into the 6 days of the week. Okay? And therefore, the Shabbos itself doesn't need anything. It doesn't, we don't eat because the Shabbos needs to be satiated. The Shabbos is itself satiation. But that satiated sense of Shabbos draws into itself bounty, blessing, goodness, potential from Bina, which must pass through the 6 spheres, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, which are like the 6 days of the week. Okay? That's what we're saying. And so we also know that Malchut, Shabbos, Malchus is called by another name too. Malchus is Hemenusa, it's faith. Mm-hmm. And therefore, according to the halacha, a person who basically doesn't abide by the laws of Shabbos doesn't really have faith in God the way a Jew was meant to have faith in God. Faith in God ultimately culminates or is decided by whether or not a person abides by the laws of Shabbos. And if you think about it, you'll see, like you say, is a person a religious Jew or is he not a religious Jew, right? And we don't mean religious as spiritual. We mean religious as a religion, which means that there are precepts and rituals and all kinds of things that have to be abided by in order to be faithful to the religion. And so, is a person a religious Jew or not? Well, he might eat things that are not kosher. Maybe he lies or he steals or whatever. But if he keeps Shabbos, he's a religious Jew who doesn't eat kosher. If he steals, he's a religious Jew, but he's a thief. He's an Orthodox Jew. But if he doesn't keep Shabbos, then even if he doesn't steal, then he's a not religious Jew, but he's a nice person. He doesn't steal. He honors his father and mother and stuff like that. So in other words, we see even the way we use the term generally, an Orthodox Jew is defined even today by whether or not he keeps Shabbos, observes Shabbos. Okay, so Shabbos is called faith, all right? And therefore, in the Shulchan Aruch, strictly speaking, a person who doesn't keep Shabbos, dino ka'akim b'chol davar. We treat him as though he's an idolater when it comes to everything. Doesn't mean he literally serves idols, but it means that other things are more important to him and he would rather serve his appetite or his ta'avot, his desires, than serve God by observing Shabbos. Okay? And so Shabbos it testifies to the emunah, to the faith of the Jewish people. Now, faith is intrinsically blind. The sphere of Malchus has none of its own light. Every other sphere, which basically is a means through which the will of God is conveyed to creation and humanity via the Sfirot, and therefore every sphere makes manifest God's will in a particular way, but the sphere of Malchut doesn't have any light. It just receives light from the spheres above. So what does that mean? It means that faith has no light. In other words, what is light? Well, Chochmas Adam To'eh Ponov, the wisdom of a person, right? Gives light, sheds light before him, and so basically, I'm enlightened, which means I know stuff, right? Faith has nothing to do with what you know, right? Don't confuse the English word belief with the English word faith, even though in the dictionary Webster probably has them overlapping, but in Judaism they don't mean the same thing at all, and I'll explain what I mean. Let's say I say that I have no way to prove this to you, but at this time tomorrow night in this part of the world it's going to be dark outside. I make that statement. Now, why do you believe me? Assuming there's no way to prove it, you believe me because as far back as anybody knows, at this time of the world, at this time of the year, it's dark outside. So belief means I can't prove it to you in any kind of objective, absolute way, but I've got enough evidence or enough experience to know that I can trust you, I believe you. But if I told you that tomorrow night, at this part of the world, right over here, at this time, it's going to be light outside and the sun is going to be shining, and if you believe that, that's faith. Right? That's faith. Faith is a leap, okay? A leap of faith. It has nothing to do with anything that's objectively or empirically provable, okay? Therefore, if somebody told you that you don't exist, right? Well, I can make an argument that you don't exist. You know what? You're dreaming, right? and you are simply the figment of some greater being's dream life. And you turn to me and say, Gedaliah, but you're here too. I say, sure, I'm part of your dream. You realize that there's no empirical way to prove that that's wrong? But you're not going to stay up nights worrying about it. Why not? Why not? Because instinctively you know you exist. You have faith in your own existence, right? In fact, God sort of has a sense of humor. You say, God, look, I'd be glad to have faith in you. Just prove a little bit that you're there. He says, listen, you can't even prove that you exist. You want to prove that I exist. Okay, so basically, faith has no light of its own, all right? It's a sense of being. Or for that matter, it's as long as I believe on a level of faith that I exist, well then, I can honor my own thinking, or I can pay attention to my own feelings, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So therefore, faith and Shabbos sort of go together. Now, one of the ways that, for the Talmud, that you see a person who's a balgaiva, how do you say a balgaiva? Like haughty, arrogant, is he takes big steps, marches along, Where if you take sort of smaller steps, it's like a sign of humility. So the Talmud says that if you take large steps during the week, then this will cause your eyesight to be diminished by 1/500th. And it doesn't mean your physical eyesight, it means your mental capacity to see things the way they actually are, okay? And this is returned to the person when that person hears or says Kiddush on Friday night, okay? Why should that be? All right, so one of the Kabbalistic reasons why that should be is that if you count up the words in the Kiddush, up to the way you make the brach of Borei Pri HaGofen, you're going to get exactly 35 words. If you count up the words in the Kiddush after you make the brach of Borei Pri HaGofen, again you're going to get exactly 35 words, except some are in brackets, right? If you don't say the things in brackets, so the Kabbalists and the Hasidim don't say what's in the brackets. There's some extra words here and there. Okay, so if you don't say that, then let's say for example. So and I'm looking in the siddur here. It's got the Kiddush. By the way, the 35 words start from Vayechulu. They don't start from Yom HaShishi, because Vayi Erev Vayi Boka Yom HaShishi is an introduction. Right. Okay, so from Vayechulu to La'asos is 35 words. Then you have the bracha Borei Pri HaGofen. Then if you count all the words up to Mekadesh Shabbos, but you leave out what's in brackets, Ki Hu Yom, you put that out, you don't put that in, and Ki Vona V'chata V'yasona Kedash B'kol Ha'amim, you leave that also, you leave that out, then you'll have exactly 35 words. So 35 and 35 equals 70. 70 is ayin. Ayin is, in other words, the number 70 is the Hebrew letter ayin, which equals 70. Or the word ayin means an eye. Okay? By the same token, so you have Borei Pri HaGofen. And when somebody says that bracha, you're supposed to look at the wine. And the wine, so yayin, the word yayin also equals 70. So basically, there's one eye and there's two eyes. In other words, you're supposed to look at the kos on one level. That's one level of ayin of 70, because it's made with yayin, with wine equaling 70. And the 70 words of the Kiddush, also the other eye, that's another eye and another 70. Okay. Also, you have to realize that the word yayin, wine, or for that matter, ayin, eye, the number 70 equals the word sod, secret. In other words, to see beyond the surface, right, is something important. So people who ate the manna and said that this is what God wants us to eat, so then we know that the manna was nivla, it was sort of absorbed into their body. They didn't have to go and excrete what they ate. The people who changed it, though, who really, didn't like to be confined to the taste of the manna, they wanted it to taste like tofu or vegetables or whatever else, right? Then they actually had to go and excrete something because they added something that didn't belong there, that was like psolot. That was sort of that which is, how you say psolot, extra, garbage, whatever, okay.
Surplus.
What? Surplus, good, okay. So that's got to do with the kiddush that we make on Friday night. Now we understand that large steps are equated with haughtiness, and that causes us to forget the large steps that we take, so they diminish our eyesight, which means our ability to have insightfulness in what we're learning. Okay. And this impairs our intellectual ability to be insightful. Okay. And also you have a Gemara in Shabbat, page 113, side A, that says that walking on Shabbos should be different than the walking during the week. We should take smaller steps on Shabbos. So therefore, if we correct our vision on Shabbos by taking smaller steps on Shabbos and making up for what we lost of our eyesight during the week by listening to the Kiddush, then we're in position to be satisfied, to know satiation from the food. And the reason the people in the desert didn't know satiation from the morning is because their eyesight couldn't see properly. They understand that they weren't able to see what they were imagining the food should look like. But if they would have been able to see the food in terms of itself and appreciate it, that would be different. In other words, it's sort of like saying the manna on Shabbos was similar to Shabbos itself, that has none of its own light. It tastes a certain way. There's a certain tanug, certain pleasure, certain sweetness of the Shabbos, okay? And there's a certain sweetness to faith. But if we're trying to understand faith or objectify it or turn it into something that we know, are familiar with, that defeats the purpose in the same way that trying to picture something else that we would like or be rather to eat is while we're eating the manna, that just brings about this surplus of waste that has to be discarded from our bodies. Okay, that kind of thing. And therefore, you should know, says Rebbe Nachman, that the day of Shabbos, if you say that all blessing comes from Shabbos, then why don't we eat on Shabbos? We don't eat on Shabbos because the blessing of all the blessings come from Shabbos, but Shabbos doesn't need anything. We eat in order to bring blessing into the week. That's why we eat on Shabbos. It's very interesting. How many meals does one have to eat on Shabbos? So 3 meals have to eat on Shabbos. What? And these 3 meals, by the way, where does it say you have to eat 3 meals on Shabbos? The Gemara learns it from different psukim, and this is a Gemara in Shabbat, page 117, side A. Okay. And so you eat 3 meals on Shabbos, 1 on Friday night, 1 Shabbos in the morning, and 1 in Shabbos in the afternoon. Why do you eat 3 meals? The reason I eat 3 meals is because Shabbos, as we said, is the lowest of the Sfirot, Malchut, and therefore the Friday night meal it parallels the Sfira of Malchut, And we know that the Ari, the Holy Lion, Rabbi Yitzchak Luri Ashkenazi, who was one of the greatest of the Mekubalim, lived here in Sfat. He wrote very little, taught a lot. His student wrote most of his teachings down. His student was Reb Chaim Vital, his closest student. But one of the very few things that the Ari wrote are, before each meal there's the Askina Sedasa. It's like poetry in honor of Shabbos. And he said that each meal on Shabbos is called something else. So the Malchut is called the Sudat Chakal Tapuchin Kadishan. It's called the meal of the holy apple orchard. Why is it called that? Because all of the Svirot are dependent, on Malchut. In other words, the power of the Sfiros is made known in Malchut. And Malchut, by the way, the sphere of Malchut itself corresponds to the Olam Asiyah, the world of doing, this world. In other words, this world is made to make known the will of God. And once that's known, we can honor God by abiding by His precepts and trying to emulate the goodness He allowed us to do, etc., etc. So why is it? What does this have to do with a holy apple orchard? I don't know. Should I show you or not? You got a sharp knife and an apple in there somewhere?
I don't think we have an apple.
We ate all the apples. Okay, listen. When you go home,
You cut it up.
Well, no. When you cut it up, you cut the apple. In other words, you don't cut it like you normally would cut it. You cut it right down the middle of the apple.
That's the way I normally would cut it.
Okay. Now, when you do that, you will see, if you look carefully, there are 10 little spots around. Pum, 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 10. Right? That's the Yud of God's name, which is the Tetragrammaton, which is Yud K Vav K. So Yud is 10. That's the 10 little dots. Then you'll see a 5-pointed star in there. That's Hey. Then the stem is a Vav, and if you turn the apple on the bottom, you'll see, you'd have to take a magnifying glass, but you'll see there's always 5 leaves there. That's the fine. All right. So therefore, Yud K Vav K, the Tetragrammaton, which stands for godliness, is made manifest through the 10 Sfirot that shine into Malchut. And since Malchut has none of its own light, it's like the apple. It has within itself all the 10 Sfirot. If you want, you can say, and it does say this in the Kisvi Arizal, that the Yud is the Kotso Shel Yud, the apex of the Yud is Kesa, the sphere of Kesa. The Yud itself is Chochmah, like it says, Oz Yosha Moshe, then Moshe will sing. It doesn't say Oz Shia Moshe, that Moses sang. So Yosha means he sang Yud al Shema Machshava Nemra, Yud al Shema Chochmah Nemra. So Yud is basically Chochmah, Hey is Bina, Vav is the 6 spheres of Zeir Ampim, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Yesod, and the final Hey is Malchut. Okay, follow that good. If not, it's not terribly important to what we read. So therefore, Shabbos, which is like, which is paralleling the sphere of Malchut, which has none of its own light, all blessing comes from Shabbos, but Shabbos, you don't have to eat in honor of Shabbos. Shabbos brings down all the food, all the blessing, all the potential, all that's necessary for life and its continuance during the week comes from Shabbos. And so by eating on Shabbos, we bring down the blessings that come from Malchus. Why do we have 3 meals? Because the first meal is opposite Chakal Tapuch and Kadishan. It parallels the sphere of Malchut, which shines, or which is faith, which is Friday night, which is the beginning of the acceptance of faith in God, Emunah. All of this, that's the first meal. The second meal is when Malchus connects with Bina, and don't forget Bina is one with Chochmah. So it connects with Bina, where Shabbos comes from, and that's the second level, where Malchus or Shabbos is connecting with Bina. The second meal is called Atika Kadisha, ancient holiness. Why is it called ancient? Because it precedes the creation of the world, which has to do with the six spheres that are underneath Keser, Chochem, and Bina. And then the final meal is Zer Anpim, small face. And why is that considered such a holy meal? Because it connects the highest Atika Kadisha, the ancient holiness of Chochmah and Bina, right? It connects it with the Malchus. It's right in the middle. And therefore, Shalosh Yudas is the time when the great Rebbes used to say Torah and stuff like that. Okay. So by the way, this may sound really weird, but you know that there's a hint to this in the prayer service, right? So on Friday night, and you have to know in the prayer of the Amidah, the Shmona Esrei, so we have 3 times that we say the Amidah every day, and also on Shabbat. So there's a part of the Amidah that's in every single Shmona Esrei, and there you have the words V'han Chilenu Hashem Elokeinu Bi'av V'ratzon, that God bestowed upon the Lord our God bestowed on us Bi'av V'ratzon, with love and with willingness. Shabbos Kodechecha, your holy Shabbos, V'yanuchu Vo, and we rest on it. Kol Yisrael, V'yanuchu Vo, Kol Yisrael, all of Israel rests on it. You notice it says V'yanuchu Vo, that's feminine. In the morning, because feminine is always she who receives the blessing, or the woman receives the seed of life from the man. That's feminine. That's the Malchut, right? Therefore Shabbos is called Shabbos Malchus, the feminine. On the other hand, in the morning, you're connecting to ancient holiness, from which everything comes. So you say exactly the same words, but in the morning it's V'yanuchu Vo, rested on it, but it's masculine. And then Zeir Anpim, which combines them all, the middle is V'yanuchu Vom, rested on them. There's no, as far as I know, there's no grammatical reason for the change. It's purely Kabbalistic. So from Shabbos comes the blessing. So we don't eat in honor of Shabbos. We eat in honor of the vessels into which the blessings of Shabbos flow. So Shabbos is Bina, right? And Bina is otherworldliness, right? And there in the other world, there is no eating. Therefore Moshe went up to heaven, he didn't eat and he didn't drink for 40 days, right? So there is no eating, there is no drinking. Therefore Shalosh Yudas, some people don't eat at all there, they just say Torah. I think the Lubavitchers do that. Most people, though, do eat, but they eat not a big festive meal. They just eat, in honor of the meal, in honor of the fact there is such a thing. But it isn't that we eat in honor of the Shabbos, in the sense that the Shabbos doesn't need us to eat in order to have the blessings that it's able to bestow. Okay, but then we eat in honor of Zeir Anpim, which are the midos through which the blessing comes, or the 6 days of the week, and then we eat in honor of the faith that we have. So it starts, the first meal is honoring the faith at Shabbos, it's Friday night. That's the meal of Chakal Tapuch and Kedishin, of the holy apple orchard. Then in the morning we eat in honor of Atika Kadisha, ancient holiness, from which is the fount for blessing. And in the afternoon, Shalosh Yudas, the third meal, that's opposite Zeir Anpim, the small face, which means it's opposite the 6 days of the week, or the midot that are associated with each day of the week. Okay, that's what he's saying, and so you should know that the eating is not in honor of the Shabbos itself, but rather Shabbos is the fount of all blessing, and therefore we talk about that Zohar. that from the eating on Shabbos are blessed all of the 6 days of the week, all right? But it's the 6 days of the week that we want to draw blessing into, not the Shabbos. The Shabbos is simply svia. It is satiation. Beyond all of this, that's kind of the lesson of what he's talking about. But there are many things here that are sort of interesting. Like you have a Gemara in Tainus, page 24b, and there it talks about Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. And Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, so every day a voice would come out of heaven and talk about that the greatness of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, that Chanina beni, God called him my son Benina, Dialo b'kav charuvim me'erev Shabbos li'erev Shabbos. He ate a bushel of charuvim, baksa, how do you say baksa? Of carobs. He lived on that from one Shabbos to the other. In other words, he hardly ate. And yet, kol ha'olam kulo nizan b'shvil Chanina b'ni, the whole world gets their blessing because of my son Chanina, blessing in food, blessing in health, blessing in all the blessings. And Chanina b'ni dialo b'kav charuvim me'erev Shabbos li'erev Shabbos. That's what the Gemara says. So you see that Chanina, what is a tzaddik called? A tzaddik in the Zohar is called Amtu Shabbos Nikula Yoma, somebody who all of his days represents the Shabbos. All right? And just like Shabbos doesn't have to work for a living, right? In other words, God provides because tzaddik b'yamanaso yichya. That's what the pasuk says. The tzaddik lives with his faith, right? And so when Adam and Eve ate from the eitz hadas tov v'ra, what were they cursed? B'zeias apecha tochel lechem. By the sweat of your brow you shall eat your food, right? So the more a person works, the more he's fulfilling the curse. Right? But if a person was higher than that, then he would not necessarily have to work. God would see to it that the tzaddik got what he needed. But that doesn't mean we all should decide we're tzaddikim and not work or try to get others to give us food, because we're not on that level. But were there to be a tzaddik on that level who's considered Antu Shabbos Nikula Yoma, that kind of a person, then what he needs in life would come to him. Okay? There's an old story that they tell about a very great holy man, and he used to sit and learn most of his waking day, because he had to eat, he had to sleep, he had to take care of himself. But basically, whenever he had any moments, what would he do? He would sit at a table, and he had a candle, no lights in those days, or a candle. And so when it came to nighttime, he would hold on to the candle, right, and go to sleep. And then when the candle burned down a little bit, he'd wake up again and learn some more. But when he woke up again, there used to be like a little, like an ashtray, a little dish. During the time he slept, he woke up, when the candle burned down, he would see some coins in that dish. Miraculously, they came. One day his wife came to him and said, our daughter is of marriageable age, we got to get her a dowry. This just isn't enough money. She said, what are you worrying about? So tonight we'll put out 2 ashtrays, 2 dishes, okay? Most of us can't do that. But on the other hand, in theory, the thing works, okay? That's maybe part of what we say in the benching. We never saw a tzaddik who's forsaken. So some people don't even say that, because there are obviously great tzaddikim who die of starvation. But maybe the tzaddik that the verse is talking about is the kind of tzaddik that I'm talking about, who's Antu Shabbos Nikula Yoma. He's like the Shabbos all of his days, but maybe there's like 2 or 3 people like that in the whole generation. Who knows? Okay, but there's something yet more interesting about all of this, and that is, what we're saying is there's a story that Reb Nachman tells us called the 7 beggars. And one of these beggars looks like he's paralyzed in his hands, okay? And And he tells the story, and he tells it to certain people who all have powers in their hands. And one of the beggars says, you know how great I am? Every time I take, I give. Every time I take, I give. That's a tremendous idea. In other words, on a simple level, let's say you see somebody who you know is in need, but you don't want to embarrass them and they don't want to feel like they're indigent. So you say, could you do me a favor? I mean, this is taking up too much room in my pantry. Or my wife bought an extra one and we can't return it. Here, take it, do me a favor, right? Right? So the beggar thinks he's giving you something, right? By taking it away, he's doing you a favor. And yet by doing you this favor, every time I take, I give. Like the Shabbos. We observe the Shabbos, and the Shabbos gives us back all through whatever we're going to have during the whole week, okay? And so basically, this idea of every time I take, I give, it's a phenomenal idea. Like, do me a favor, can you please take this from me? You know, I have a friend of mine. He's an older fellow, you know. I mean, he's not as old as I am, but you know, he's a student of mine, and he's probably in his 40s or so. And he comes and he learns with me sometimes in Yerushalayim, or now we do it on the Skype. So he says to me, he says, you know, I didn't get along well with my father growing up, and now he's coming to visit me. And it's not the first time, and he loves the kids, and he's much easier going now, but there's always this strain between us. And I wish there wasn't. You know, what am I supposed to do? So I tell you, you know what you should do? You should make up a problem, whether it's a real problem or not, and then ask his advice. Right? and then say, oh, you're going to have another problem. Every time you see him, ask him to share with you some insight or some advice about something that you're doing or you're involved with. And you see, after a couple of times, you're going to become really good friends with him. And that's what happened, right? The same thing is with bringing up children. You don't always tell the kid what to do. Sometimes you ask the kid's advice. Or sometimes you say, I'm not sure, what do you think? Right? And even if you are sure and you don't need his advice, that doesn't matter. As long as you do that, they feel like they're giving you something, they're giving you some insight, they're giving you some advice, right? And so every time I take, I give. Right? That's the person who appears, you know, I say, I have a problem, can you help me solve it? So he feels like he's giving you something. But the fact is, he's receiving much more than he gave, because you're acknowledging his existence. You're acknowledging the importance of his opinion, etc., etc. Of course, don't overdo it. There are people who, me and my kid are going to become pals. That's not a very good idea either. But if there's the respect, and yet this person, my father, my teacher, wow, you know, I gave him some advice and he thanked me for it.
Right.
That's a whole different story altogether. So every time I take, I'm able to give. Okay. There was one of the students of the Baal Shem Tov who was called Reb Leib Soraf. Reb Leib the Soraf. A Soraf is an angel that burns things up, like a fiery angel. So there's the Serafim, the Chayas HaKodesh, the Ofanim, different levels of angels. Serafim, the Ofanim, the Chayas HaKodesh, and the davening, right? Serafim are really great angels, they fiery angels. So there was this man, his name was Reb Leib. He was a very holy man. And he had heard about the Baal Shem Tov, who at that time was living in Mezhevitz. And he didn't know what to believe. I mean, is this for real or it's not for real? Don't forget, it wasn't so just about 60 years before, but there was a Shapsi Tzvi, who was the false Messiah, and everybody gave him so many praises. And, you know, I got to check this guy out. I don't want to say he's a bad person, but I suspect he's a charlatan. Who knows? Let's check him out. So Reb Leib goes to Mezhevitz, and he comes there on Friday morning, and he checks into an inn. And he says, I want to stay here for Shabbos, I want to have my meals here, and his plan is he's going to go over to the Baal Shem Tov, and he's going to be there for Shalashudas, for the third meal on Shabbos, when the Baal Shem Tov says Torah, and he's going to get a sense for who he is and what kind of students are there and so on. And so he checks in, and meanwhile checks in Friday morning into this motel or into this inn. Okay. After he's there a couple of hours, a messenger comes from the Baal Shem Tov and says the Baal Shem Tov is inviting you, he heard that you're here, he's inviting you to his home for Shabbos. You can eat all the meals there. So Reb Leib says, well, listen, I appreciate that very much, but I already checked into the hotel, and I don't want to have to take my money back or anything like that. So the messenger comes to the Baal Shem and tells him. The Baal Shem comes in and tells him again. He comes back from the Baal Shem Tov a second time. He says the Baal Shem Tov says that he won't mind because he's a student of mine, the hotel keeper, and if he understands that I would rather have you at my home than have you in the motel, he's going to be very happy that he can do me a favor. So Reb Leib sends back a message. He says, yeah, but I got to tell you the truth. It's not that I don't want to come to you. I'm afraid you're not going to have enough food for me. So the Baal Shem Tov says, don't worry about it. I'll have enough food for you. So Reb Leib says, in that case, I'm going to come. Anyway, Reb Leib shows up at the Baal Shem Tov's house, and it's Friday night, and they daven together, and then the Baal Shem Tov makes Kiddush, and they sing Shalom Aleichem, and they just Chaim, they make Kiddush. Serves the first course. This Reb Leib takes out like a platter, all right? I'm not sure what it was made of. Maybe some kind of a platter that was made out of glass or something, but it has in it, carved out into it, Yud K Vav K, the Tetragrammaton. And he takes this platter and he puts it down in front of him. It's not a very large thing. Puts it down, sits like this, looking at it, starts eating the fish. And he says, more. He keeps on eating, he keeps on looking. In other words, he's looking at this, he's eating it because of the honor of Shabbos, because he wants to bring Shabbos into the days of the week. And he doesn't want to eat it because he's hungry or because the food tastes good. He wants to eat it solely because God said, you should honor my Shabbos. And how should you honor my Shabbos? With achila, with eating and shtia and drinking. Also malbushim should have nice clothes for Shabbos. So he's honoring God by eating this food on Shabbos. Wow. So he keeps eating and eating until finally the waiter comes over to him and says, whispers in his ear, if he has any more fish, there won't be enough fish for tomorrow. So fine. So they bring him the next course, right? Like soup. And he starts eating it. He's looking. And again, he eats so much food that they tell him it's going to be enough for tomorrow. And he does the same with the main course. So after the meal is over, the Baal Shem Tov looks at him and says, that I thought you were like an angel, Abba Kain Sorov did, but I didn't really know what kind of angel you are. You're a Sorov, you like burn up the food. So from that time on, they called him Reb Leib Sorov. Eating in honor of Shabbos. He's not eating for the Shabbos. He respects the fact that Shabbos is the fount of all blessing. And by eating, by eating for the honor of Shabbos, he's kind of emptying himself out like the Malchut, which has none of its own light. And when he eats in honor of the Shabbos, then that honor is dispensed through the world into Malchus as a result of his eating, which is empty of ego, empty of pleasure. Okay? That's the idea.